What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode here on the Archi-Tech Network. Today, we have a super special podcast and a super special guest. It is our 40th podcast since we started back in the good old days of Clubhouse. And today, we've got our guest, Arthur Mamou-Mani, and we're going to be talking about Eco-Parametrics. We'll be talking about what is Eco-Parametrics, the tools and technologies he's using in his practice, like 3D printing, as well as his kind of more entrepreneurial side. He has two businesses, and he's also teaching full-time. So we'll delve into all of that. Otherwise, don't forget, if you like this podcast, give us a like, give us a subscribe. You can check us out on Instagram, where we'll post upcoming talks. We post little snippets from the podcast, as well as upcoming courses. And then with all this talk of parametrics, if you're feeling inspired, you can check out our Grasshopper Masterclass, which is online now on Archi-Tech Network. You can check it out in the link below. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's jump into the podcast. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining, Arthur, because it's great to have you on. This is a special episode. It's our 40th episode since we started back in the days of Clubhouse. So, I appreciate you're a busy man, but the audience has been really excited. I think you've come up a few times in other podcasts. We're talking about, interesting practices and architects. So thank you so much for joining. Let me just give the audience a little bit more of an introduction for those of them who don't know you so well, but I'm sure our audience know you pretty well. So you are a French eco-parametric architect, which I like. We'll delve into that. I like that. You're the founder of Mamou-Mani Architects. You're the founder of FabHub, and you're also a lecturer at Diploma Studio 10 at the University of Westminster, which you are literally in right now with your students around.
Literally in the studio with the students here. Every Thursday.
Every Thursday, yeah. So I think it's kind of we'll definitely touch on how you kind of juggle these things, because entrepreneurship is also like a big topic that we like to talk about, and it's obviously like a big feature of yourself and your career.
Yeah.
But I thought an interesting place to start is to maybe touch a little bit on like how you got started with Mamou-Mani Architects and where you are today, because I think especially just seeing recently you're really getting going as a practice, or you're starting to kind of run, so to speak, and I see you guys more and more doing really cool either installations or architecture products and stuff like that. So give us a little kind of how you got started and how you feel you are now.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, and it's very nice to be here with the students. Actually, it's unusual. Usually it's always in my office with some very formal headgear and all that. So it's a pretty experimental session. But I graduated from the Architectural Association in 2008 in London, and it's in the middle of the crisis. And so I ended up in a kind of unexpected job, really. I was trained, it was a similar year where, say, Neri Oxman or Ahim Menges were graduating. And so it was that year of sort of excitement around digital fabrication and 3D printing and biomimicry and parametric design, but very early days before Grasshopper really was launched. And so it was, and I worked at Zaha Hadid during my summers. And so and my neighbors were Mark Forns and Alvin Huang, and there was this sense of like, wow, computers can do cool stuff and like really unusual geometries that can then be sent to really interesting machines. But really, we were trained a lot in technology, but the practice were not necessarily adapted to that, to what we were being taught. It was a very pioneering school, and I ended up in a job where actually the practice had won a competition for a really complex roof, but they modeled it without necessarily knowing how to do parametric models. And so I ended up really being responsible for the geometry of that complex grid shell. And that was great, to be honest. Like the fact that it was a practice that wasn't necessarily used to that sort of thinking meant a lot of responsibilities. And every Saturday, I was being asked to teach Grasshopper, which really pushed me to know it better. Because when you teach, you have no choice but to know what you're talking about. So, so I spent all my Friday evening learning it and Saturday teaching it. And that was like for, I don't know, 2-3 years. So it really sharpened my understanding of everything, parametric wise. And yeah, so I spent 3 years doing that, and then that project unfortunately didn't happen, and I was just like, what am I going to do? And to be honest, I was asked to teach more and more, and I really, really wanted to assemble the 3D printer, and I really, really wanted to use parametric design and 3D printing as a way to democratize and empower people to design. And so I had this idea of a space like where people could come and customize designs and print them. And so I registered 2 businesses. One was called the People's Atelier. It was very French, very fancy. And then another one was just my name, because I knew that even though this would happen, I needed to have an architecture studio, because that's what I've been trained to do, and maybe they could work complementary to each other. So that's how it started, really.
Awesome. That's interesting. So how far was that out of university? You just kind of like, I mean, because there's a mentality in that you started your own business. So it's like, you get out of that, I guess, employee mentality, like, this is the way I'm going and stuff like that. So
to be honest, I think employment is wonderful. Like, I kind of wish I could have done this in a company. I did say to my I don't like the word boss, to my colleagues that we could have a fabrication space. Like, I did kind of share the business plan, or the ideas at least that I had with my colleagues, but there is a moment in time where what you want to do and the company you're part of might not, it might not be in the same direction. So really, then I explore the possibilities, and really, starting a business is extremely hard. So one should only do it because it's needed, because there is no other place that does it. And like, there was just no other. I looked at everything. I looked at all the tech shops, the hackerspace, the Fab Labs, and then I looked at all the architects that might use Grasshopper, but I was being asked to teach practices that were established. So I was just like, And I was being asked to freelance on many projects, because there wasn't, the software just happened, and so so really it was a combination of being asked to teach, to freelance, and to and this idea that I was just pursuing this what eventually People's Atelier that became FabPub, which
So fast forward today, and it's now FabPub and Mamou-Mani Architects, right?
Yeah, it's nice, because I honestly, it's easier to connect the dots afterwards than it is during. But FabPub needed investors because it needed machines, and so it needed to be a separate company, because an architectural company can't really raise funds, because it's not really what we call scalable, and it's very rare that you have a company that is actually beneficial for investors as an architectural company. So it just didn't make sense to keep them in the same, and not just on an investment level. I really didn't want anyone to feel threatened to come to FabPub, knowing that somehow there's an architect there looming behind the door, and I it was really genuinely to help people. Like, it wasn't it wasn't some part of some master plan. It was just like, there is really amazing technology that used to be in factories and that now can help you print locally. So like, that's amazing. I won't need them all as an architect. We do some projects with the technology, but really most of the time other people use the machines. So why keep that just for me? And then just sort of, it happened that it got a bit of traction, and our projects through the architecture company allowed us to push the possibilities, so that others could say, you use sugar to do this pavilion. We use sugar to do our pavilion. Of course, that's the whole point, because then we can change the world. That was the idea.
I think there's a few points we'll definitely swing back to. I mean, like the business model side is not something we really talk about as architects, right? Like, you're right. The FabHub business model versus an architecture business model is a strange thing, right? Because you're kind of like an R&D firm. It is like very much about building a name and reputation, and it's a very complicated. I mean, the idea is simple, right? You offer services for money, but it's like selling a product is a lot, in my mind, quite simple. Like to formulate that business plan. So now, how many people do you have at Mamou-Mani now? Because you've just completed Carthesis at Burningman. Of course, you did the Epic Temple a few years ago. You've done some incredible collabs in the 3D printing space with COS and other kind of stuff. So, what does your practice look like now?
So the architecture firm has probably around 12 permanent employees. The FabPub has maybe, I don't know, 8 staff. And then we have at the moment, about 30 freelancers that are in and out of the office. So it's probably a total of 50, but it's a very lean, flexible, like we are not always expanding with huge project. We just had a very large project, so we expanded quite a bit. And then, of course, it's not always like that. So we try to keep a core team that is sort of always thinking long term. Associates and directors, and I have a partner now as well. So we nurture these relationships, but often it just blows out of proportion because suddenly we are being asked to do a huge project. That's just the nature of being contractors or fabricators for FabPub. Mamou-Mani is a lot more long-term projects, because architects have this benefit to work on long-term projects, contrary to fabrication. So that's how it looks human resources wise. But we're all in the same space. Although, I think that's really nice because the architects can get to see what they work on, and they can see it being materialized, which means so that's really good because and we worked on very early on. I worked with a friend of mine, Adam Holloway, on a plugin for Grasshopper called Silkworm, and this sent vectors to G-code, and that meant that we could really work on the craft of 3D printing through parameters, so doing parametric 3D printing, which meant that, depending on the settings, you could actually really work with differentiation within the 3D prints. So it really allowed us to create really unusual pieces and have real mastery on the different things you can do with a printer, and not have unnecessary material, and so in that sense it really gave us a conversation with the machine, as opposed to usually an architect models something and then send it to a contractor, etc. It goes for template. So this wasn't the case. It was very circular from the start.
Yeah, I mean that's the dream of adopting technologies as architects, right? Is it going to connect us with the act of making, whether that's through 3D printing or just simple CNC machine or robotic fabrication, whatever it is. I think 3D printing is the most beautiful sequence of, like, literally you got the architect sitting on their laptop and then the cable is going into the printer. How do you feel like 3D printing, as an industry, are we getting on with 3D printing? Because I was always super excited about it, but I was always kind of like, are we in the technology hype curve of 3D printing? Of course, as architects, we went nuts creating renders of like giant blobby buildings that were, monolithically 3D printed. But then, you guys are doing kind of quite large installations with 3D printing as well as architectural products. We're in the office collaborating with Icon that are 3D printing homes right now out of concrete and stuff like that, and they're working on like more bio-based materials. But it's really kind of surprised me, right? Like how quickly we've gone to, you can 3D print homes today. How do you feel we are as an industry in the world of 3D printing? Like, do you think this is going to be more and more kind of, we'll just see it become more and more mainstream, or is there still a bit of a learning curve to really get it to like an architectural scale of larger homes and stuff like that?
I think we're probably past the initial the fantasy world where people were like, oh, it's like in Star Trek. People are starting to understand that they can't really have one at home, and that it's a bit hard, and that the material does its thing, and that the software is not. It's not like buying an iPhone yet. I don't know if it will ever will. I hope so, but I think we are really in a moment where people realize they have to work with experts, and they have to understand the constraints in order to model stuff. So in terms of like where it's going, as in within what we perceive, definitely the strength of 3D printing is that you can print locally. You can prefabricate modules like any prefabrication architecture, but in this case without any molds, and using things like biomaterials or ceramics. Of course, you can use concrete and so on, but comes the questions of environmental design and what sort of material for what use. They are really interesting, like our new robot that we're getting, I'm quite excited, is multi-material. So it switches its head between ceramics, biomaterials like bioplastic PLA and so on, and metal. So I would imagine that if you create a module, you would imagine that it doesn't, like, you're not going to do an entire building out of plastic, nor are you going to do an entire building out of clay. Like, you need strengthening elements, whether it's timber or steel. It will always be multi-material, and it will always be an assembly of stuff. Like, I can see, yes, using a giant machine printing at least the shell and core or something, but even then it's missing the plumbing and so on. So buildings have always been assemblies of stuff, and so you need factories. Like, and the good thing about 3D printing is you can have mini factories that don't require the same level of tooling that a specialized factory needs. And so really, that's where we want to take FabPub, is having these mini factories around the world, so that not only could you print locally and prefab building components or furniture or interior design and so on, but you also have the ability to grow material and also get rid of material, knowing that it goes back into the cycle. Because a recyclable material doesn't mean it gets recycled. Putting stuff in the bin, you don't have a control where it goes. So if you're an activist, environmentalist, you don't have access to the infrastructure that allows you to live your activism. So you need spaces, infrastructural spaces, factory-like spaces that help you, give you a choice as a human being to help the planet. Like, and we just don't have them. Like, even if we did like a PLA bioplastic stool for you, and we said, here it is, I still don't feel safe that this will be environmental enough, because I don't know where you're going to put it once you're done. I want to say, well, actually, bring it back, or we'll come and take it back, or we want to offer that sort of life cycle, because if a business doesn't look at the life cycle of what they're doing, it just really is not matching the world today. We can't not have a circular approach anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting view on it. I mean, like, I guess the advances in 3D printing are as much. I mean, the technology of actually printing is. I mean, I've assembled my own little flat pack one, which I got, from China or something, and it's like, building one is it's actually quite a simple thing, right? It's just like an XYZ motor and that kind of stuff. But it's materials that is really driving innovation as well. Is there anything on the horizon that's particularly exciting you about, moving up to the scale of homes, for example? Like, I'm wondering about hempcretes, for example, or any kind of materials that you see excite you about scaling up?
Um, so one of the issues, say, with materials is the scalability, of course, but also basic things like fireproofing or UV resistance. And it's kind of boring, to be honest, but it's the key thing that we're missing in order to go architectural. Hempcrete is not structural. Ceramics is not. Concrete can be, but it obviously is not enough. You need the steel reinforcement. They were exciting, and they are exciting research done by WASP about earth printing, but they add lime, and they still need timber substructure in order for it to stand up. And so, I think it's for me, it's what are the modules we're building. It's how can we build even flat modules? You talk about the installation at cost. We printed this in 2D, so we used our printer as a 2D printer in order to print a truss that was two-dimensional. When you print a truss in 3D, you have to cool down the materials so much that it's actually quite slow, and it's not enough. Then after that, depending on what the truss is made of, you need the reinforcements, the insulation, the plumbery, etc., etc. So I think having multi-material robots, or having the ability to also pick and place elements, what they do at the ETH when they had this mesh and they actually added the concrete and so on. Like, there's so many. So when it comes to 3D printing, I would say what excites me is really the ability to have machines that are capable to handle the diversity of elements that a prefabricated module would need, and then the ability to assemble these modules so that they make sense. Like, I would imagine a very clever brick would be super exciting.
Yeah, it's much more of a modular approach than that. Of course, as architects, we're kind of drawn to that monolithic idea of you press print and this giant printer just.
Of course, it just makes our life easier. We don't have to deal with a contractor. But but architects, it's funny because we tend to want to control everything. Like, it's the thing, isn't it? The sort of creator's complex. But how amazing it is to work with craftsmen, people that know their jobs. Like that conversation, you talked about Burningman. That's what I really enjoy when I go there. I work with metal worker. I'm on site. I'm like an intern there.
Yeah, it's a crazy. The way people always ask me, like, what is Burningman like? I always say it's like just the most creative place I've ever been. It's like a city of creativity. Like, whether it's your outfit, their bikes, a car, camps. It's just pure creativity.
Yeah.
And of course, we should maybe touch on it. Like, Burningman is very. You're very linked to Burningman, and your practice is very linked to Burningman. It is almost, I think, how did Burningman play a big role is kind of what I'm getting at, is because you started with these kind of trips to do with your unit in Westminster, right? And I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the background, which is looking Burningman-y. So yeah, how much did Burningman play a role in, not only the development of Mamou-Mani, but what you teach and
yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm very much a geek. Like, I didn't go to any of these events. I've never been to Glastonbury here, and I was teaching Grasshopper, and I was very much in the digital world. And my colleague Toby, with who I teach here, it's been 10 years that we teach here, and it's nice to do this interview from here because it's I love it. Like, I could potentially stop, but I just don't want, because it's just this amazing collaborative spirit, and it's so fresh, and there's always new research to explore and understand and make sense of, like AI and so on. But he had a girlfriend or something that came back from Burning Man, and then he's like, there's this place in the US, and we had an interview with the dean, and we're like, well, we're both interested in things like Freyotto, like, the architecture of Freyotto or Buckminster Fuller, and the idea that, form finding of also the notion of modularity. All this was already here in our desire to explore those things. And then because his girlfriend came back and said, there's this amazing place where people are assembling giant geodesic domes, and there are all these principles, leaving no trace and self-reliance, and it's a really interesting place, and it's really unusual, and it's got an element of play and playfulness, which parametric design really lacked. It was very serious. Parametric design was, component based, and then you had these. I don't know. It was beautiful maybe, but not playful. And so we pitched Burning Man it was the dean, and I was like, "You're never gonna get the job, right?" And I was 28 years old, and it was for a unit master, and somehow we got the job. And so maybe one of the reasons I'm here is I'm so grateful that they even took a shot at it, and we started submitting designs to Burning Man. We realized there was a grant. And so we had 20 students working, for like 6 months on a design. And so they were amazing renders, beautiful proposals. They're all on WeWantToLearn.net. We had that group where we wanted to share everything and create this community of experiments like Freyotto was doing with the Institute for Lightweight Structure, but online with a blog. And so people were sharing their display. And we were just, when students were like, but it's already been done, we were like, well, it's not about that. It's about continuing a body of research and sharing it so that you're just a node in a network. You're just a step in and that spirit of humility, to see the architect as a researcher, was very interesting. And so Burning Man received these 20 renders, and they call us. They're like, who are you? And we're like, well, a bunch of students and teachers here from Westminster. And so Betty June, who was in charge of the art department, just flew to come and see us, because I think she got really interested in this notion of university researching Burning Man. And that was I don't know, maybe 8 years ago, maybe. And so she came here, and she got to tell us, look, your proposals are really impressive. None of you have won the grant because they're too crazy. But here is what you can do. And then she started explaining the constraints and blah, blah, blah. And so the next year we submitted again and won 2 projects. 2 students, Thanasis Koras and Georgia Rose Collard Watson's students, they both won. One was a scaffolding, a fractal made of scaffolding, and then the other one was a shipwreck made of laser cut plywood. And it was crazy. I mean, we went there, 20 of us, never been to Burning Man. And Burning Man was making fun of us because we were just a mess. Our camp was falling apart. But the learning curve was incredible. I felt more like the students than the teacher, to be honest. We ended up doing that TEDx talk with Toby, where it was so funny. It's just, you can't see any of the slides, but we were trying to explain how much we've learned and how this place, because it's so hard, because it's so remote, you have no choice but to self-rely on. You can't blame anyone. It's all, you have to fundraise for it. You have to. It's so hard that it binds people and it binds community together. So that's how it started, really, the whole Burning Man thing.
I mean, I think it's an amazing connection to have a studio that kind of doesn't revolve around it, but you participate in almost every year, right? You kind of, each student submits something. I think it's the perfect place to also learn the realities of actually building shit, and then also building in the most difficult, or one of the most difficult, in environments on the planet. You can't just go down to the shop and pick up another, bag of screws or whatever. If you haven't got enough, you gotta make them or find them or
Exactly. So you have to learn welding. You have to learn what's what's an off-the-shelf piece of timber. What's a Simpson plate.
How are you gonna get electricity? You got to bring a generator. And
what are you gonna do with your bins?
You need water. It's I think it's an amazing combination of Burning Man and bringing students there. So I think it's actually, I didn't know the story behind it. I think it's a really interesting story of like how you actually got that connection. And so it's become a big part of, your own architecture philosophy and your students, and you were doing all of these cool installations every year, and then it kind of culminated in the temple a few years ago. You did Galaxia, right, which was in 2018. Because I think I went the year before. I really wanted to go to that year, but at the time I was getting my visa for the US, so I was stuck in the kind of like no man's land of visa application.
Yeah. I mean, so after we went with the students, we went like there were about 3-4 years with students, and it was really tricky because, well, I'll pass you the boring bit, but basically we didn't get any insurance. So the university was here, but they didn't really, they didn't want to take the risk. Of course, it's really risky, and the financial risk and the liability risk. So so it was all on us really as teachers.
Yeah.
And that's okay for a while, but I got really tired, like doing the crowdfunding campaign, and and I'm like, and everyone around me is like, what are you doing, Arthur? Like my then girlfriend, now wife, she's like, Arthur, what's going on? I had a students in the attic. I was doing their, the grasshopper, like, and so at some point I'm like, maybe I should stop doing that, and maybe, I could submit some stuff myself. And so I submitted this piece called Tangential Dreams, which was in 2016. And it was really for me, the culmination of what I've learned as a student myself, to be honest. And it was made of 2x4s, and they were tangents that were curving in the sky. And on these tangents were written the dreams of people, and people would write on these dreams. And of course, the temple of Burningman, which is, for people that don't know, it's like every year a different architect creates a temple that's secular, where people can write things about deceased relative and so on. And it gets really emotional because it's a place where people cry, and it really moved me. I went there and I was just really, really moved, not having a specific religion myself, like to have a place where I can be spiritual. And so I think Burning Man really enjoyed the Tangential Dreams, and then there was a competition that is actually an open. I don't know if Burning Man would like it to be named a competition, but really we know it as architect competitions. Yeah. And so we submitted Galaxia, which was really the notion to have like a universal symbol that everyone can relate to, and to have I remember the brief was how to go from a intimate alcove-like space to a communal grand space where you can congregate. So it's literally, Galaxy is literally that. It's like it's from an intimate alcove to a large central space. It also happened to be very inspired by a project I worked on a while ago, which was for Virgin Galactic, the spaceport, which is all generated through recursion, which is a way to grow things in the computer. Hence the natural look of it and the Fibonacci sequence look. So that was that.
Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible piece. I remember just, I was looking through Instagram and stuff when the event was on. Like, if you're not there, that's the kind of only portal into what's going on. And some of the pictures coming out were incredible. And that's a very iconic project for Burning Man. Of course, it's been featured in a ton of documentaries and all that kind of stuff. And I think that, like when you look at a lot of your work, you can see there's this connection to natural patterns, which of course also feeds into the world of parametric and computational design. Is this kind of where this term Eco-Parametrics comes into it, or is it more? Is it also the third element of a sustainability approach to like you say, materials and design and stuff like that? How would you define Eco-Parametrics, or where did that come from?
So there's a few dimensions to it. When we were being taught parametric design, we wouldn't necessarily specify the parameters, right? Like we just say it's parametric, so just use these parameters. And so anyone could really gear parametric design towards a parameters that matters more for them. For me, technology is only useful if it helps planet or humans, right? And so, especially now that we know we have 8 years, it keeps on going down in order to reduce our carbon impact. And so really the environmental parameter is the one that matters most for me, but I'm pretty sure for everyone, really.
Yeah.
So every time an architect decides to create something, the architect has a responsibility to make choices, and these choices should really be oriented towards the impact it has environmentally or in terms of society. And so that really is the most important bit. There is always also just the fact that I find that there's a really interesting paradox that I really love, which is like the more computerized our designs are, the more we use the power of the computer, the more we generate things with the computer based on rules, the more it starts looking like natural processes, the more it looks natural. And I love that paradox. I love that we had to go through technology in order to go back to nature. And I see it more and more. I mean, I might take you around. We're looking at all these tools like Midjourney and Dolly and all these things, and it's just crazy how natural everything looks. And so I love this notion that the computer helps us reconnect with materials, with nature, with physics, with things that we lost when we started creating shapes in the computer, really.
Yeah. Actually, I get that a lot. Like I get people saying, doesn't using all this digital technology kind of you lose the craft or the human aspect? And I often, mention your work as well, because I think it shows that there is this other there is a digital craft, and it, for different people, it means different things. But, technologies like parametrics or computation and 3D printing allows us to get back to that kind of, level of detail, the materiality, the tactileness of materials and stuff like that. So I think your work is a really good example of, there is this beautiful craft in embracing digital technologies, which I think people, are often a little bit, what's the word? It's like a natural kind of tendency for architects to kind of, not adopt these things because they're losing control or it's going to be like super sci-fi kind of looking just because you use Grasshopper, for example.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets really interesting is when you reconnect parametric tools with ancient knowledge. Like there is a reason the wood is a certain size. There's a reason how we cut trees, how we actually extract the timber. And so, for example, when we worked on the I don't know if you saw it, but we worked on the Orange headquarters, Orange Fabrication headquarters, and we had these pods, that were welcoming people to the building, and so we used straight pieces of timber to form the curvature. We used steam to bend them into the position they're at, instead of CNCing a flat piece of. I mean, when we were taught Grasshopper, we were taught how to nest things and then to CNC them or laser cut them and so on and so forth. But really, timber comes in a certain way, and really, just like food, you don't want to. You know how we say don't eat processed food. But architects shouldn't use processed material, but the more processed, the more carbon. And so really, if you're going to use the raw materials, then craft is linked to these raw materials. The type of tool that carpenters use, the constraints that carpentry tools have. Can we bring this into our Grasshopper models, our parametric models? Like, can we have a carpenter advise on our parametric models? Can we have a specialist of ceramics advice? Like, can we? So in our office, we have carpenters all the time coming around, and we have carpentry tools. We have specialists of ceramics, of glazing that advise us because we have a kiln. We have things like using technology does not cut you off from the thousands of years of knowledge that's been accumulated. Well, one of our problems as humans and in general is that because we want to invent, because we want to patent, because we want to be the creator, we cut ourselves from a sort of continuity of research, and therefore we lose sense of the vernacular of the amazing wisdom that happens through centuries. And so that's why I love university, because it reconnects you. You lose this sense of it's my kind of corporate world where it's my IP type thing. It's like, wow, F it, let's just share.
we're very like we're very guilty of that as architects, right? Because it's almost like sometimes it's almost like we have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's been done before. We need a new shape for the wheel. Yeah. It's like, well, it's been working for a pretty long time. Like we should probably listen to these kind of like past experiences, or like you say, like this kind of passover of knowledge. I think is some architects are better at it than others, for example, or more open to it is maybe the word.
I mean, their architects are sometimes good at it, but I can't help thinking that we're actually terrible business people. because we reinvent everything, and really we don't create products out of what we do. And that the Wooden Waves project that we keep on kind of developing in our workshop, and we've done the headquarters for Bureau Happold, and it was now in the boardroom of Orange, and we are working now for another iteration of it. We have a project that's turning into a product. And the benefit of that is we don't reinvent. We build up a really kind of well-crafted and sort of, like, I don't know, fashion designers, or they develop things a craft that they become very proficient at, and then that you have that quality. Or the car manufacturers, if you buy a Ferrari, like that you can build up onto that knowledge of the craft. And a lot of architects talk about the car manufacturers, but they don't really. They always rely on a company that sells product, and so architects are becoming like specifiers that say, "Hey, I want the Kingspan insulation here. Hey, I want the this and that." Whereas, well, why? Like, why can't architects be entrepreneurs and develop products as well? Like, I think that's a really important thing to learn. And here at Westminster, we ask students to develop business models, business plans. We ask them to think of the clients. How can this be repeated in terms of modularity, and how can it fit within an existing refurbishment? Because we can't always do new buildings. We have to refurbish. Anyways, so these are
No, I think this is one of the subjects I really wanted to get you on to talk about, because I think what you said I've almost repeated on a number of podcasts. Like the Ferrari example is like when you see Zaha or Foster's or Big post on Dezeen or whatever, you always get comments that are like, it looks so Zaha-y. It's like Zaha are being told off for looking like their own authentic style. And it's not like you drive by a Ferrari goes by and you're like, another bloody red Ferrari. Like, come up with something. Like, we don't do it. And as architects, we're like, we're done with this project. So we almost like throw it away and let's start again. So I think that idea of like your project where it's turning into a product is super interesting, and it's really great to hear that your students also develop business models and stuff like that. I really think that's the future, and we're often talking about like yourself, and I think Chris Pratt is also really good at this. With the Burt project, where he was kind of like put this idea out there and he turned it into a business rather than a competition. Like, we spend all these time doing competitions. Like, each competition could be like a business. You add a business plan to it and you have a little business there. Which kind of brings me to the thing I wanted to touch on also, was this, your entrepreneurial side, and you have these kind of three or 2 businesses and your full-time teaching, right?
Well, one day a week.
One day a week, yeah. But there's something. I mean, it sounds on paper bonkers to have like all these things going on, but you can see how much they overlap. Like what you do at Mamou-Mani is just very linked to fabrication, and as you said, you've already explained before, it's they split because it's a completely different business model. And then what you're doing in Westminster is almost like your ideas hub, your R&D hub, but also a way to teach the next generation. But how do you feel it's been, managing, or like, is there any kind of, how do you manage the 3, kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, endeavors that you have going on? And how do you feel we can, maybe make the next generation of architects a little more entrepreneurial rather than working on these endless competitions and stuff like
that? So just in terms of like logistics, when you, there are teams, right? Like when I'm in the office, and it wasn't always like that. Like, and it's really easy to have the 10 business if it's just one person, to be honest. Like, it doesn't mean the business is like active, or having a business and actually having a working business is 2 different things. And a working business always has teams, and so really it's about working with amazing people, and like the people that work with me are absolutely amazing, and they're and they feel a sense of ownership, and they feel a sense that they want to develop systems and to empower others, and they have I think people that work with us, they have a sense that it's useful, it's impactful, and so therefore it's not working for someone, it's working towards the greater good. So for me, that's a really important aspect of it. Plus, I think I was thinking about it today. The fact that I'm out one day a week means that they have to deal with the office without me, which means it forces people to think in terms of systems and like how can we actually work this out without necessarily having a top-down upper management of some sort that is micromanaging. Like, to me, it's I really enjoy seeing the development of systems that can scale, like both in design and business, the bottom-up approach, then a top-down, which is very much what architects' offices are. They're very top-down usually, and that's, I mean, you can't blame a society wants to see that creative genius. They want to see that heroification of people. Like it is what society, but it doesn't mean that in practice it's like that. And we all know that. I worked for the biggest firms, I did, and Jean Nouvel, and I can see the power of the teams. Like Zahadid was especially obvious because you can see it continues without her. And it was closely linked with university. I mean, they had the DRL, they still have it at the AA, which is a program where the students are really taught a method. And here, I mean, being here at Westminster, I could say that it's part of a big master plan, but to be honest, I just really enjoy it. So I don't really have a logic for it. I just really enjoy it. Like, it's a great day to get my mind off stuff, and I work really hard during the week. So to be here and to actually have a more abstracted conversation on projects and on the future, and not having a really clear client or deadline, and just having the chance to explore is a fantastic therapy for the mind.
Was there a point where it was not working, juggling these things, and there was something specific that a change in mentality or something that helped? Because I can, even doing these podcasts and working full time, you can see there's there's points where you need to okay, this is working, you need to shift and adapt.
It's like nature, you try stuff, some stuff don't work, you sort of trim them off, and some things work, and so you nurture them. It's all about listening to the failures and success, right? And recognizing failure and listening to people that says, Arthur, what are you doing? Like, stop doing that. Like, or my wife going like, you're crazy, Arthur. Like, you need a partner.
Yeah.
And so as long as we are open to criticism and not take them personally, but know that what matters is the future and the lessons that come after, and not, a lot of people would dwell in the past or a failure, but honestly, move forward and try to listen to people that tell you there's a real danger here, there's a red flag. We have these questionnaires in the office so that people can, we have these long reviews where we sit down together and people are really open. Like, when you're willing to listen, people will tell you how to optimize. And so I think it's the crucial, like, and yes, some things didn't work out. I was teaching too much. I sort of narrowed it down to my favorite teaching. I narrowed it down to, a certain involvement in FabHub that doesn't take all my time. I narrowed it down to certain clients that I prefer working with. I narrowed it down. You talk about Chris Presh. He taught me how to say no to. I was pretty much a yes man.
Yeah.
Chris is amazing. And he's such a good businessman. He is, like, he can manage. And I say this not as in like he makes money or anything. I just mean it in terms of he is authentic. He is truthful. He manages to balance his work and his life. And he's a model to me. Like, I love speaking with, and we're the exact same age. Like, I love speaking to him. And we always talk about logistics, like, of our lives and of our businesses. We speak design, and we obviously did a project together, but we have a long conversation on these topics. I really, So it's nice that the peers can also speak and figure it out. We have a group also between architects that we speak about these things together. Just like you, I think you have that in your podcast.
Yeah, no, and it's a big part of why we started this podcast. Is like, you and me might go to the pub and have this conversation, but why not let other people listen in and get something for it? For sure, I'd love to have Chris one day. We'll hopefully get him on in the future, but we'll see. Maybe to kind of, because I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but maybe the last thing we'll touch on is, and you've already hinted at it already. You're already kind of playing around with. You've dropped the Midjourney, DALL-E, that kind of stuff. There's so much going on right now, like with, metaverses, blockchain, AI, game engines. It's almost like, my job in the office is to try and keep on top of these things. And it's hard right now because there's so many interesting things. There's so many interesting threads to follow. Is there one that's particularly interesting you? I know you've mentioned Midjourney and the AI stuff. What's your thoughts on the future of or is there any particular one that you're interested in, or
let me walk around a little bit. I just want to show you, because this is like all over the wall, like, and it just keeps going. It keeps going, and like even more here. Sorry, you can hide. Yeah. You can hide if you want. Here it is. Like we're looking at the AI, because we're just. I think we're both fascinated, worried. We want to make sense of it. We don't know how to deal with it. And so we are collectively trying to make sense of what's going on. And we know it's a revolution, just like parametric design or digital fabrication. They were all, revolutions in our world. So if we don't tackle them, or if we're scared of them without learning about them, we're simply going to reject opportunities or be lost, and so I think that to me is a crucial aspect of our role as architect, is to try and embrace and learn before it's too complicated and overwhelms us.
I think it's exciting but scary at the same time is a good way to describe. I mean, literally every day I'm keeping quite a close eye on it right now and testing it. But it's just like every day you find something completely mind-blowing that's, releasing next week or coming, and it's just moving so quickly.
We were having a funny conversation with my colleague today, where we were like, AI is like this, crazy architect that doesn't know, gravity, physics, the costs. It becomes this sort of egocentric architect that just keeps on creating crazy stuff, and it turns you into someone who needs to implement it in reality. And so it turns the architect into the reasonable one. Chris Fresh, we were having that chat the other day where we're like, what AI will do to us is that it will force us to think of reality, like what we just talked about, the size of timber, the craft, the materialization. There was a whole era of paper architect. It's done. Like, we will become the craft architect, we'll become the contractor, back to master builders. Like, we will become the implementation people. We won't be anymore the sort of freely expressing our ego, because it just won't. It's not going to work. The AI will do it better.
Yeah, architects have almost become image creators, and suddenly overnight, there's someone else creating a lot of images.
Yeah. So like, where is our added value? And I think it will be in making it real, in becoming the entrepreneurs that make it real. We'll learn the other aspect of our job that we let go of because we were so fascinated by the image.
Yeah, I think there's a long way to go for AI, but it's gonna happen quick. It's happening quickly, I think, and people just gotta keep an eye on it and embrace it rather than kind of have this natural rejection of it. But exciting to see you already jumping into it.
Yeah, it's hard not to be honest. It's so overnight. It became such. Everyone started sharing AI images, and I got addicted. I got hooked. Like, I the whole night. Like, my Sandy, my wife, she's just like, "What are you doing?" Like, I had my laptop in bed. I don't like that. Usually, I like to cut off, like, and I saw myself like a kid, like, just enjoying. And even when I closed my laptop, my brain kept on going, as if my brain had merged with the brain of the, like, I just, these little iterations just kept going. And I just, okay, that's it. This is a tool for inspiration. It's incredible, but what are we going to do from it, And it's nice because the students they have these amazing images, and then they try and materialize what they're seeing. And like, and it's very humbling as a process, because you're not the initiator of the idea, you are the implementator. And so, sorry, I don't know if that's English, but that means you're in charge of turning something to reality, and that's what architects should be, really.
That's an interesting view. I hadn't thought about it like that. Like, we're now just we're kind of like the slaves to the imagination of AI, right?
Well, it's a dialogue. I think it's always a dialogue, right? The material, when you do craft or laser cutting, or you're bending or expanding elements, it's not like you're a slave to the machine or the machine is a slave to you. Like, it's always a dialogue. Like, you're constantly observing what's going on and then implementing. So it's very circular. The notion of slave is very linear. It's very from one side to the next, but it's not, even for AI, it's not like that. It's a circular. The AI is not going to generate thing without you saying generate thing. It's not going to call you one day and say, I need an intern.
you don't know.
Well, hopefully not.
No, you're right. It's almost like it's a co-designer. It's a collaborator. It's it's a colleague.
Yeah.
Exciting. Well, I think that's a nice place to maybe end the podcast, because I think it's kind of like maybe a topic. Who knows? We might have you back on in a few months, and things are completely different. But I really appreciate your time. I think it's been a super interesting conversation. For sure, our audience will be really interested in this one. I don't know if there's anything. We always invite our guests to. If people want to kind of find you, obviously they can find you on Instagram. Is there any kind of thing that you have coming up that you'd like to kind of, promote, or anywhere where people can find you? We always like to give guests a chance. We'll put in all your links into the below the video.
There's a lot, of course, and I hope the people that are truly passionate can reach out, and we can see if we can work together 100%. We have a big conference happening in April called Shape to Fabrication. It will happen here in Westminster, and we will have the parametric world and digital fabrication world. Of course, it's in the name, Shape to Fabrication. That will kind of come here for workshops and talks, and I hope to see you, Oli, there, and other people. It will be at the University of Westminster, so I'm very proud of this. Here on Baker Street, where Sherlock Holmes lives.
For all our international listeners. Yeah, I saw that the other day. I spoke to Paul. For Brilliant. Sure, as a minimum, I'll definitely attend. If not, Amazing. I'd love to get involved. So, 100% I'll be there next year. So,
and let's go for a drink then, because I think we've been planning to do this, but as you see, it is hard to find time. But I think we should. It'd be nice.
I'm not far. I'm just in Shoreditch. I know you guys are up in the Containerville. So
just Hackney Road, before the bridge, turn left, the Oval. That's where we are.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. We'll grab a beer soon. But thank you so much for your time.
Cool.
And thank you for everyone for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple of weeks for another podcast. I'm not quite sure what it'll be, but we'll have it on soon. But thank you again, Arthur, and we'll speak to everyone soon.
Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.